As many of you know, no organization has played a more important role in the evolution of journalism, and particularly journalism education in the U.S. in recent years, than the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. The foundation partnered with the Carnegie Corporation of New York in the Carnegie Knight Initiative on the future of journalism education, that involved a dozen leading journalism schools and is just wrapping up after many years. The foundation has given more than $300 million in grants under its News Challenge, its Community Information Needs Project, through micro grants to faculty members, and transformative gifts to journalism programs small and large. And in the interest of full disclosure, because we are a journalism program, I'm pleased to say that Murrow last year received a major Knight Award, about $100,000, to help us support and bolster NWPR's coverage of minority populations, particularly the migrant worker populations in and around Yakima, and a related training program for young would-be journalists. Knight's mission, yes, thank you. Knight's mission is, as they write, to preserve the best aspects of journalism and use innovation to expand the impact of information in the digital age. It's a mission that organization has ably fulfilled, and this brief video will give you a sense of that.
The Knight Foundation.
The Knight Foundation.
The John S.
and James L.
Knight Foundation.
It's transformative ideas.
It's transformative ideas.
Media innovation.
Fostering the arts.
But what is it?
What does that really mean?
What does it look like?
It's a foundation.
It's not really a foundation.
Not the way you'd think of one.
It's not red tape and no.
It believes the best ideas don't come from one place. And not being afraid to make the boldest of experiments.
It's helping individuals and organizations change communities for the better.
It's empowering citizens.
It's information.
It's libraries of the future.
It's not an ivory tower foundation.
It's a public park foundation.
It's turning information into power.
And giving power to individuals and communities.
To understand their own condition.
It's $1 billion in grants.
It's the awesome foundation.
It's the coolest foundation.
It's new ways to explore social media by time and place.
It's young black leaders.
It's placemaking for filmmakers and film lovers.
It's startups and fake universities.
It's using text messaging to connect government and citizens.
It's transforming communities through art.
It's government that works in the 21st century.
It's protecting the lives and the rights of journalists at home and abroad.
It's about reaching every single person on the planet.
It's MIT.
It's the Arab American National Museum.
It's O Cinema.
It's choral morphologic.
It's Code for America. It's believing in Detroit.
It's public innovation.
Fostering the arts.
It's social entrepreneurship.
It is the future.
John S. and James L. Knight ran community newspapers. They created this foundation to carry on that legacy of engagement.
The Knight Brothers.
The Knight Foundation.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation.
It's my pleasure to announce that the Faculty and Advisory Board of Murrow College have voted to present the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation with a special Distinguished Achievement Award in support of journalism and journalism education. And we're fortunate to have with us tonight to accept the award Eric Newton, who is the Senior Advisor to the President at the Foundation. Eric, thank you very much for joining us. How about that, yes? We'll let her hold it.
Well, thank you. On behalf of Knight Foundation, thanks to Dean Larry Pintack and all of you here at the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication at Washington State University. This honor is singular. We will treasure it. You know, mostly we're in awe of the company you would have us join. Murrow himself, the quintessential journalist, his move from radio to television, a perfect example of how we have to rise to the task when new forms of media emerge. Knight Foundation exists because two brothers, Jack and Jim Knight, and their mother, Clara, decided to give their personal fortunes to endow our foundation. Those fortunes were earned by building in what was Murrow's day the nation's largest newspaper group. We grow their money, we recycle it back into the communities where they made it, and into journalism and media innovation, which is how they made it. The foundation supports journalism excellence in the digital age, hoping to find out what in the 21st century will inform and engage communities the way Knight newspapers did in the 20th. Both Edward R. Murrow and John S. Knight placed trust in the people they served. Murrow said, "When evidence on a controversial subject is fairly and calmly presented, the public recognizes it for what it is, an effort to illuminate rather than agitate." Jack Knight said, "We seek to bestir the people into an awareness of their own condition, provide inspiration for their thoughts, and rouse them to pursue their true interests." We all are going to need to travel light as we seek the best possible future for journalism in the 21st century. Our techniques and our technologies must be flexible. Yet we are not without obligation. We still owe people illumination and inspiration. We carry forward a responsibility fought for and paid for at times with blood. This obligation comes in the form of a belief that journalism is above all a fair, accurate, contextual search for truth. Our work, the news, may be perishable, but our values can't be. Murrow and those who came before set the standards and kept the faith. Now, in this time of rapid change, it falls to us to help new generations keep honesty in their hearts. Thank you.
Now we can't let him get off that easy. And we figured that since he was here, we'd get our money's worth out of him. Eric, I did not say in this earlier introduction, began his career in the newspaper business. As a city editor, assistant managing editor, and managing editor at the Oakland Tribune under Bob and Nancy Maynard, he helped the paper win 150 awards, including a Pulitzer Prize. As you know, he now serves at the Knight Foundation, and for over a decade, he's been a pivotal figure in expanding Knight's journalism and media innovation programs, and he's a visionary who has written and produced online content that outlines his view of where the industry has been and where it's going. But he also has a direct connection to our conversation today about Al Jazeera. In 2001, Eric developed a television program called Mosaic, World News from the Middle East. And that provided US audiences with selections from TV news programs in the Arab world. And it's something I used in 2003-04 at the University of Michigan in my classes. A dotted line links that program with the development of Al Jazeera America. And it's worth noting that Mosaic earned Newton a Peabody Award for Excellence, an award that Al Jazeera America won just this week. So I'm pleased to welcome back Eric to talk more about Mosaic, the evolution of international journalism, and his role and view of where we're going. Eric?
Thank you. The nights were frugal. One guy gets to come and do both of them. Tonight I'd like to tell you the story of a television program called Mosaic and of its impact and the lessons I think it teaches us about news and journalism in the 21st century. I'll start with a video clip.
As the aftershocks of the Iraq War continue to reverberate throughout the Middle East, many Americans are curious how developments in the region are being perceived by national leaders and people on the streets of Damascus, Beirut, Jerusalem, and Cairo. 4 times per day, Mosaic, World News from the Middle East, brings you unfiltered news in English from over 15 national broadcasters throughout the region. See what over 250 million people in the Middle East are watching every day. Hear directly from their correspondents and discover how they assess the current situation, not in short sound bites, but in complete unedited news reports. Get the whole picture. Watch Mosaic, Mondays through Fridays, only on Link TV.
Mosaic started in the months after September 11, 2001, and the destruction of the World Trade Center, and it ran for 11 years. It was a 5-day-a-week sampler of what 280 million people in 22 Middle Eastern countries were seeing on their nightly news. It was, one reporter said, an unusual news program. Another said it drew raised eyebrows and puzzled expressions for many in the television news business. Why? Because it presented the news unfiltered the way it was seen in the Middle East and not the way we would have reported it. Mosaic was innovative enough to win 2005 Peabody Award. It influenced network coverage. When its time slot changed, the White House called to find out what was going on. Over time, it drew, in cumulative numbers, millions of viewers and millions of dollars in funding. This is to satellite public access TV. And it inspired other news as you see it programs, Latin Pulse and Global Pulse. It led to a news literacy game on News University. It was the most successful program on its fledgling channel, Link TV, an iconic show for them that drove their growth. So what was Link TV? The Hollywood Reporter called it one of television's best-kept secrets. It was launched in 1999 after winning an FCC-mandated competition for a public affairs slot on satellite television. It was a standalone nonprofit that ran a 24-hour channel bringing satellite news from around the world to Americans in their homes. Its music, and they had a lot of music videos, documentaries and news programs were available on DirecTV channel 375, Dish Network channel 9410, and later selected cable channels. Now, because of Mosaic, Link was suddenly the object of coverage in the New York Times and the print media from coast to coast, including a piece on ABC wherein Peter Jennings, upon peering into the makeshift San Francisco offices of Mosaic, said he was looking at a production room, and then he added, well, let's call it a production room. For me, the Mosaic story begins the week of 9/11. I was new to the Knight Foundation, and Link TV had received a launch grant from the foundation for the entire channel. This was a departure from our traditional work of endowed journalism chairs, endowed training centers, major training for mid-career journalists, First Amendment projects, freedom of information projects, high school journalism programs, support for industry organizations and such. So being new, I scheduled a get acquainted call with Kim Spencer, the president of Link TV. And then came 9/11. The attack occurred as the Knight Foundation board was having its quarterly meeting. I was scheduled to make a presentation on whether or not the Corcoran in Washington, D.C. could start a photojournalism program. The question was, can a museum and a school known for art really do serious photojournalism? My presentation consisted of a sentence in the middle of all the live TV reports saying that the Corcoran had just dispatched photojournalists to the students to the Pentagon, where a terrorist-controlled plane had just crashed and taken out a chunk of the building. Our board got through its business very quickly, and the Corcoran program, I'm happy to say, was a success. I didn't know it at the time, but Kim was on the line with the TV control room at the United Nations when 9/11 happened. Link had a grant from Ted Turner's UN Foundation to put the UN General Assembly on the air. You have to love Ted Turner's optimism that gavel-to-gavel coverage of the UN is going to be, an audience builder. I also didn't know it at the time, but Kim had been trying to figure out how to get this new Middle Eastern channel, Al Jazeera, onto before an American audience. So when the Link team was looking to see where they could get an Al Jazeera feed on the Canadian satellite, they found all these other Arabic language feeds. And from previous work with his wife, Evelyn Messenger, Kim knew that when you compare and contrast stories from different sources, you can develop a very interesting program. So the weekend after 9/11, we had our get acquainted call on the Saturday. And by then, all over the news stream, American journalists were asking the question, why do they hate us? Many were shocked to see the often repeated clips of the celebrations in the street after the attack. And a common theme was the world has changed. And Kim and I disagreed. We didn't think the world was any different than it had always been. What had changed was whether or not Americans wanted to know something about the rest of the world. Well, how could that happen? Kim said that Link could get many feeds and whether or not it could get Al Jazeera. And then I thought, well, maybe he's on to something. If they could show America what the television news, the nightly news in the Middle East was saying about America, we could start to get an idea of how we're perceived around the world. So Knight made a $250,000 grant to launch what became Mosaic. So this brings me to the lessons of Mosaic's success and what that tells us about enterprises in this new digital age. The first lesson, building over planning. Mosaic was a small, nimble startup within Link TV, which was a small, nimble startup. They could stretch a dime, spin on a dime. They were dynamic. Small and nimble has a big advantage over large and slow in the digital age. Building can be more important than planning. The cost of entry for new media ideas is so low, as MIT's Media Lab leader Joey Ito says that it's just easier to build things than it is to sit around and talk about it. If I'd been working with a large institution on Mosaic, that first grant wouldn't have been a launch grant. It would have been a planning grant. And by the time the plan was done, the moment would be gone. So lesson 2, sunglasses as well as searchlights. This is a hard one for traditional journalists. The project recognized that we live in a world in which mainstream journalism is not the only information people can and should create and use. But in the digital age, there is way too much going on to try to find everything yourself. So while the producers of Mosaic called it unfiltered because they didn't alter the programs themselves, the news programs themselves, I think they were something other than that. They started with just a few feeds, and ultimately they were monitoring 38 of them all day and pulling out things they thought would be of interest to a U.S. Audience. The way I see it, they were both an aggregator and a huge filter, because they gave us a sample. And we still need to shine the journalistic light so people can see. We still need, more than ever, the kind of journalism you heard the Al Jazeera staff talking about at the previous session. But sometimes we need to be able to provide a giant pair of sunglasses so people can see. We're in the seeing business, not in the shining business. And that was Mosaic. Lesson 3 was collaboration. Mosaic was produced by an open, collaborative team. Its co-creators were David McKellis, who was an Israeli journalist, and Jamal Dajani, who's a Palestinian-American producer. They had to be masters of negotiation to talk the broadcasters into sharing their feeds, especially Dajani, who did the lion's share of that. They had to set a standard for tolerance in their newsroom because of the starkly contrasting stories that they aired. You know, one story saying that an explosion was a suicide bombing by terrorists, another saying the same explosion was a martyr attack by freedom fighters. Lesson 4, iteration over execution to plan. The concepts of Americans hearing what the world has to say is certainly not new. But the Mosaic team brought a new sense to it. They immersed themselves in the feeds. They slept on the couch during the Iraqi war. And because they did that, they mined the feeds for the latest news. And Mosaic had a freshness that made it compelling. We thought, well, this will just be a lot of different points of view. But we ended up with a program that was airing news before it was being aired in the United States. So you got stories about civilian casualties of war and Abu Ghraib before you saw them on American television. Lesson 5 was engagement. The Mosaic viewers were not considered a passive audience. They were an active community. There was a crawl across the bottom of the screen that told people to go to the website because some of these broadcasts were state-controlled. Others were independent. You had to go to the website to find out what was what. We considered the website and the television program to be one unit. If there had been tablets, we would have said that's some kind of second screen experience, but it was before those. Each side would call the others propaganda. So the only way to try to provide larger context was to go beyond the reports themselves. And my role from the very first phone call was to argue that we had to do whatever we could to make this program a new form of journalism or a different form of journalism rather than something else. So the website had to give meaning to the feeds. The crawl had to work, sending people to the site. Whether each of the pieces of the mosaic were truthful on any given day could and was debated. But together, the program provided an accurate depiction of what the Middle East was seeing on TV. Together, it was truly what was happening. The producers were independent and got to determine on their own what clips they wanted to use. The issues behind the news were discussed in regular specials that Dejani did called the Mosaic Intelligence Report. There was a lot to talk about. This was, I suspect, the first time that such a wide array of voices was seen in America from a region where we were at war. Dejani was a widely sought after interviewee. His insights routinely made it onto network air. Now, when I say Mosaic had impact, it's not just the State Department watching it or the White House or the other programs and donations that it inspired. It was not long before the other networks figured out that they could use these feeds too. And so it changed what was being seen in television in the United States. And I think in some way, in some cultural way, it may have helped pave the way for Al Jazeera to finally be able to break into the US. You know you're having impact when someone tries to ban you for being un-American, which an activist of the town of Newton, Massachusetts did unsuccessfully. My most vivid memory of Mosaic came in 2004 during the Democratic National Convention in Boston. My wife, Mary Ann Hogan, walked in as I was watching a report of the anti-war protests at that convention. You may not have seen those reports, but I was watching them. The views of the demonstrators were being covered in some depth. "What network is this?" my wife asked. "I haven't seen these protests on anywhere on television." And I got this funny smile and said, "This is Iranian TV." Iranian TV on Mosaic. What would Murrow say? I would hope he'd be intrigued and let fly with some of those quotable quotes like, "We cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home," or "We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty." I even would have settled for, "Hey, that's better than wires and lights in the box." But in the end, Mosaic did something that was sadly but truly also symbolic of the way news organizations are operating in the digital age. It died. In 2012, Link merged with KCET, the Southern California broadcaster that had become the nation's largest independent public broadcaster by splitting from PBS. Mosaic ran out of money just before that merger. That said, it was the hardworking staff of Mosaic and Link that caused the channel to develop the value that made it a desired asset to be acquired by KCET. Media death is far more common in the digital age. Programs and even companies are coming and going at a pace many times faster than before. In traditional media, failure is seen as a bad thing. But in Silicon Valley, they say fail fast and fail forward. People are hired because they failed. If you've had 3 or 4 failures, you can be especially attractive. Why? Because you know what to do when those things happen again. So consequently, that's changing some of our views of what's important. We're coming to value people more than projects and networks more than organizations. As Dejani put it, technology makes things possible, but in the end, it's still about people. Mosaic may be gone, but the people and the ideas behind the program live on. So, you never know. In the book we came out with last year, Searchlights and Sunglasses, which you can get on the web at searchlightsandsunglasses.org, I argue that the digital age is the fourth great age of human communication. What that means to me is things like citizen communicators, open collaborative teams, continuous media innovation, and interactive community are not passing fads. That they're as fixed in this new world as democracy would come to be in the centuries after the creation of the printed book at the start of the last great age of communication, the mass media age. So we're in the early stages of this new digital age. To some, feels like science fiction, because it was. Arthur C. Clarke's geostationary satellites, they're real. The cell phones on Star Trek, real. The tablet in 2001, A Space Odyssey, real. Skype from that cartoon, The Jetsons, it's real. This constant stream of new media is not to be feared, but in fact, it's a staple of American history. Every generation since the pamphleteers at the Revolution has grown up with a new major form of media in ascendance. I say that again. Every generation since the Revolutionary War has grown up with a new major form of media in ascendance. Weeklies, dailies, the telegraph, radio, TV. This is an unbroken line of innovation. Generations are shaped by the media that comes of age as they do, and then they shape it. We all know about the baby boomers and television, but there's the Gen Xers and personal computers, the millennials and social and mobile media. It is the obligation of young people to pay attention to the media around them as they are growing up and to take that media over as they and the media come of age. Why isn't this going to continue? It's been going on for centuries. If it does continue, after the millennials, there will come another generation, a cyber generation. They will grow up with a batch of technology that exists now, but is not yet ubiquitous. The global cloud, smart grids, ubiquitous sensors, wearable media, drones, robots, and artificial intelligence. Journalism, if there is to be journalism, has to deal with that. If technology continues its rapid growth, the generation after that will come into the era of biomedia with augmented reality and implants and nanotechnology and enhanced human capacity. Some people in this room are going to live to see that. They're going to say, I remember when this lunatic came to Washington State University and told everyone there would be implants and, and 50 years later, sure enough, there were. After that, we get into the realm of the futurist Ray Kurzweil. Believes in the singularity, a future of sentient machines with cranial downloads, thought aggregators, smart environments being normal. And in the final generation of this century, if Kurzweil is right, you end up with thought projection, telepathy, telekinesis, things that seem insane today, things that seem like science fiction, in fact, are science fiction today, but someday may be real. The current reality of the influence of technology in our field and the undeniable potential for faster and deeper influence in the future of journalism. They make being a good journalist and teaching future journalists much harder than it's ever been. Murrow saw how things were getting more complex. He said the newest computer can merely compound at speed the oldest problem in the relations between human beings. And in the end, the communicator will be confronted with the old problem of what to say and how to say it. The what to say part is hard enough, but the how to say it is coming to mean a lot more than the essential clear sentence. It can mean knowing which way to launch that sentence or image or interactive infographic or algorithm, and using what hardware and what software to what device. By now, if I've been doing my job, you should all be in a real mess. But there's no avoiding it. To stay relevant, we in journalism need to learn some more about numbers and about technology. We have to move beyond statistics to big data. We have to move beyond building broadcasts and front pages and stories. At least some of us have to learn how to build products. We need to move beyond learning some topic knowledge and some technology to being able to rapidly learn any topic knowledge and any new technology. That's why I believe schools like this one, who teach journalism by doing journalism, also have to pioneer new techniques and community engagement. We talk about the teaching hospital model, but if you want to visit a teaching hospital, you'll find it doesn't just deliver babies, it doesn't just cure people. It develops new techniques that are used throughout the field, and it does an awful lot of research. There's a lot to be proud of here at the Murrow College. There are a lot of exciting changes going on. There's growth. There's new possibilities. You're really making a lot of progress. But the work, it's not done. And the world will not stand still. If Murrow were giving this talk, if he were confronted with this same situation, I wonder how he might end it. And looking at Harvest to Shame, I think maybe it might go something like this. The people we see inventing the future of news have the strength of engineers and computer scientists. They do not have the soul of journalists. They can't bend the new technology to create the journalism society needs. Maybe we will. Thank you. Thank you.